And we are live. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. We have our great friend Alex with us again, and we have
Thank you.
another great friend. Hang on a second. And we have another great friend with us today, a very special guest, Jerry, and he's got a channel called Jerry's Take on China, and recently came across it, and I just found it fascinating. He's got a lot of stories to tell, and all-around great guy. He's got a lot of knowledge about geopolitics and around the world, and especially about China. And I decided to invite him to have a great conversation with us, and it's a pleasure to have you aboard, Jerry. Welcome to the
Thank you very
channel.
much. Thank you. And it's great to see you. And it's great to see Alex again. We met in July, I think it was, in Chongqing,
Yeah.
maybe August.
Time is flying. Great to
Yeah,
see you
half a
again,
year.
Jerry. And
Yeah.
hi to everyone. It's interesting tonight that I'm actually the guest tonight. Normally I'm on the other side, but AJ says, you know what? I want to have you guys on the screen tonight. And I said, okay, AJ, you're the host. You do it. Let's see what happens. Thanks,
Yeah,
AJ.
it's good. We thought we'd try and change things up a bit. Today I'll be trying to do something different with the channel, ask a few questions. We're gonna have a different sort of show today. We're gonna call it three different takes on China based on Jerry's name of his channel, because his channel is called Jerry's Take on China. So we're going to have three different perspectives. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to throw some questions around, and I'm going to get Jerry and you, Alex, to basically answer them, and with your own take, obviously. And I've got my questions in front of me, and before I start, I just want to say hello to all the moderators. Thanks for joining, guys. I'm just going to check who's there. We got Anom here as well. We got Zuge. Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And everyone else, don't forget to like and share. Let's push this for the algorithm. Really appreciate it. So the questions I have for today. Actually, what I'm going to start with, I've got this major story, just breaking news yesterday. Basically, what happened was Qatar signed a major gas deal, and we're talking about 60 billion LNG deal. This was signed for a long-term deal for around 50 years or something, and it was a huge deal. And the reason it was a huge deal because the Europeans and the Americans have been pestering Qatar to give them this LNG for years now, and you've seen, um, Habeck going into Qatar. You've seen Boris even going into Qatar. You've seen Biden going into Qatar and literally begging them for LNG and oil. And yesterday there was a big announcement that they have given this contract to China, and the Europeans are absolutely shocked, and the world is shocked, and we have to ask ourselves why. Why has this happened? And I mean, I've got one answer to this, and you just have to look at the news, and it's all related, guys. Everything in the world is related. And the World Cup is all about the World Cup, because you've seen the news. It's all about human rights in Qatar, how Qatar is not following human rights, and this is because Qatar has not been giving them oil or gas contracts, and they decided to pick on Qatar for various reasons. And beginning of the World Cup, all I could hear is human rights this, human rights that, nothing about football. And I think Qatar just said, you know what, screw this. We're just gonna, sell this contract to China. Screw the West. I mean, what's your take on it, guys? I'll start with Jerry, then I'll go into Alex.
I think that's a really interesting question. It was a 27-year deal to sell 4 million tons of gas per year for 27 years. It's the longest deal in history. Until a few weeks ago, actually it was less than a year ago, it was about this time last year, November, early December, America signed a deal with China to do pretty much the same thing, but it was a 25-year deal. And I think it was a slightly less. It was 3 million tons or something like that. Obviously, they're fulfilling the needs that China has of getting gas, which is cleaner energy than coal. What they have done, and both of these countries have done something which has really hurt my home country, Australia, because Australia was exporting gas into China. But you're right, absolutely right, AJ. It has been nothing but human rights problems, worries, issues, all the different problems related to Qatar until this deal was done, which obviously people knew that this deal was coming. It wasn't public knowledge, but people in the industry would have known very well that this was coming. But I see another little issue here, which is no one's talking about this one, and see if this is ringing any bells with yourself or any of your audience. There aren't enough ships to do this. So right now, the pipeline from Russia into Europe, part of it's broken and part of it's not functioning, and it's all sanctioned anyway. So the idea was that America would ship across the gas from America into Europe. They've also got contracts to ship gas to China. Now, a lot of that gas was being transshipped, never coming to China. It was being sold on paper. So it was shipping in America on the ships straight to Europe, and all the paperwork went through China and it was sold to Europe without the gas ever arriving here in China. Now, there aren't enough ships in order to provide both countries with their need, or both regions with their need, European Union and China with their needs. So the other thing is, I think that China is probably going to find itself in a position where it builds more ships. What that then does is put China into a virtual monopoly. They currently own something like 35% of all the containers in the world, 20% of all of the container ships in the world, and they will then own, once this is done, all of the gas ships that are not owned by Greek shipping companies in the world. So I think that's probably an underlying factor that remains to be seen. It will give China some form of monopoly on transportation of gas, if not a monopoly, a duopoly with probably the Greeks, and a triopoly, with, if that's such a word, with the Americans, the Greeks, and the Chinese. So we're kind of entering into a George Orwell, three different regions. We've got the Oceania, we've got the Eurasia, and the Asia. So interesting to see where it goes from there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of nastiness going on about Qatar. When a country doesn't give America and the West what it really wants, then suddenly that country becomes a pariah in terms of human rights. We've seen it for the last 5 years with China, very much so. So that's my take.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the Beijing Olympics. And as soon as the Olympics started, you've seen all of these stories about human rights, and you've seen all these countries, Western countries, decided to boycott China. And Putin actually turned up, and he signed a lot of deals with China at the time. I believe he signed a gas deal. He also signed many other great economic deals. And then a few months later, the West, the same West that boycotted China's Olympics, were asking China for a favor. Oh, do you mind sanctioning Russia, please, for us? Would you mind doing that? I mean, why the hell would the West, ask for these favors when they literally embarrass China by boycotting the Olympics? And when you boycott another country's Olympics, that is like the worst insult you can give to a country. And there is no way that China would, sanction Russia. Who Putin actually at least he turned up. Watched the Olympics, and built up a lot of relationships and built up a lot of good rapport with China. And then the West, who have boycotted China, asking for favors after that, it's just beggars belief. And with Qatar, I mean, you cannot talk about human rights when you ignore what's happening around the world, when you ignore what's happening in Palestine, when you ignore what's happening in Yemen, for example, when you ignore what's happening in Syria, you ignore what's happening in Afghanistan. You cannot talk about human rights until you basically put all of these countries in the same way. I mean, they pick and choose where they want to use their human rights, and they use human rights as a weapon. I'm not here to support Qatar, and probably some of the stories are right, but what I don't support is when the West basically picks and choose which country to pick on when it comes to human rights. And signing the gas deal one day after the World Cup started is not a coincidence with China. I think that was a big finger up to the West, saying, you know what, you've completely embarrassed our country. This is what we're going to do. We're going to sign this deal with China. And this happened a day after the World Cup started. And a lot of countries actually boycotted the opening ceremony. In UK here, we didn't see the opening ceremony. It was boycotted by most of the channels, including the BBC. So it was kind of like a boycott. And I just think the West has completely shot itself in its foot now. What do you think, Alex? What do you think about all of this stuff that's happening?
Well, let's just think back here a little bit. Let's go back to 2017 when there was quite a diplomatic crisis in Qatar. They had the Saudis angry. They had the UAE angry. They had pretty much everybody in the Middle East as well. Bahrain, Egypt. Qatar was in a very difficult position back then, and I think they're in a difficult position now. They're looking for allies, and what the best way to get an ally on side is to give them something that they need. Let's also fast forward from that diplomatic crisis to 2021 and 2022, where China did have a big liquid natural gas deal with Russia that they actually put on hold. This has been on hold ever since March of this year. So I think what China does is they shop around. They look for the biggest cat. They find them. If they can get a deal done with them, they line it up. They put their money where their mouth is. No problem there. They can sign the checks, fast forward the money to them, and even pre-approve for it to get a nice discount. What's happened here is the geopolitical landscape has drastically changed, where you have Russia, who's pretty much the top dog in liquid natural gas. Of course, the Americans got lots, but as Jerry has also explained to the audience, that logistically doesn't make sense. Trucking that stuff halfway around the globe, and you need special containers and ships to do that. So what China has done is they signed the dotted line with Qatar. Now, let's think about who else is in that region. Well, the Saudis are there, okay, and they are good allies to the Americans. And after that, then Qatar. Now, it could be the timing is interesting that they signed it. I mean, it could be a deflection. To me, I think it's a straightforward deal, but it's a deal that could, as we have discussed here, 27 years, it's a lifetime. But I'm wondering at what price they're selling this, at what forward future price they're selling this. Because when you enter a deal like this, or if you're forecasting and you're an owner of a, PetroChina or some of the big ones, Shell Oil, they're buying on futures, and these future prices can get locked down. Give you an example, guys. 4 or 5 years, they were giving away natural gas 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's at a premium. Okay, what is China paying for the next increments? 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? They have already calculated what they're paying. So the Qataris could potentially be signing the deal here, risking, if there's a spike in natural gas prices, they're not going to be able to enjoy that. So it is quite a serious deal. I think when you have 27 years, that's like, it's almost like the mortgage companies. When you're going to buy a house, you want to lock in that fee. Now, China's been probably pretty clever on this. They probably really hard negotiators, and they probably advance Qatar some money, because the Qataris in the Middle East right now, you got to just look back at 2017. Their planes were not allowed to go anywhere. They weren't allowed to land anywhere for the longest time, and they pretty much squeezed the Qataris out of oblivion, but they managed to get an agreement. That's my take on this.
Exactly, Alex. And a lot of people probably have forgotten that there's a deal happening, which Jerry mentioned, with United States. And this deal started during the Trump era, when Trump put some sanctions on China at the time, and there was a trade war going on. And they signed a deal. I can't remember the name of the deal now, but and as part of that deal, it was up to China to sign this LNG deal from United States, and they had to buy a certain amount of LNG per year. And this was a long-term deal, and this was a fixed contract. And that was then during the Trump era. And at the time, LNG prices were very cheap. fast forward to today, and China is making a huge profit from that deal. Absolutely huge profit, because it was fixed price, and because it was something that they signed for a long term. I can't remember the exact term, how long it is. And it looks like the Chinese are winning, and they are reselling that LNG to Europe with a huge profit. And they're doing the same thing. And also they have replaced that uh, they have replaced that American LNG from Australian LNG, I believe, because
Yeah.
Australian LNG was the biggest. Um, they were buying from Australia as part of when trade relations were fine and everything was fine between the two countries. But since Scott Morrison came into power, I think obviously the relations soured quite a lot, and I think LNG was was one of the main things that Australia had suffered, because what they did, what China did, they cancelled the um, LNG contract with Australia and signed a deal with the Americans. And first of all, this is how your friends treat you, and this is exactly what America's doing to Europe. They are destroying Europe's economy, industry, and in the meantime, they are signing deals with the Chinese instead. And this is exactly what they've done. So, what do you think about all of this, Jerry? How would you
Yeah,
put it?
it's the same degree of hypocrisy when which you mentioned before. When America wants somebody to be sanctioned, they come along and say sanction these people. They want China to be sanctioned about all kinds of different products. One of the things, obviously, we've got tomatoes, we've got cotton, we've got solar panels, we've got all kinds of different sanctions going on in America from America to China. Then, of course, when it suits them to do business, they're quite happy to do business, and that's not a bad business that they're doing. They did do a big deal. It was in November last year, and it wasn't the Trump era. It was the Biden era, but it was the biggest deal in natural gas history, one of the biggest deal in fuel histories actually, and it did cost Australia a lot. Now, the other thing about Australia that most people are not aware of is that trade between Australia and China has never decreased. There have been down months, but overall trade between the two countries has never, ever decreased. What has happened is there was a problem with coal, there was a problem with barley, there was a problem with lobsters, and there was a problem with wine. Now, those problems are all itemized, and China has told the world what the problems are, but Australia are telling the world that this is China bullying them. It's not actually true. Iron ore and coal still coming across to China in big amounts. Wine is still coming across. I can buy wine in the local supermarket that's from Australia. There's no problem with that. So a lot of the stuff that we're reading is not the stuff that's really happening. And I think that's what a lot of people forget. But one thing that, just getting back to your original question, it's not about who's got the gas and who hasn't got the gas. It's about the hypocrisy of America will have these standards that apply to them when they are in command of something, and they will expect everybody else to apply the standards when they haven't got command of something, and they want to regain control. And that's the hypocrisy of it. You mentioned human rights, and you went through lots of different countries: Palestine, Yemen, Syria. All of these different countries, they all have human rights problems, but one of the worst is actually the United States. And the United Nations Human Rights Council can't get in to have a look, because the last time they tried, they were stopped at the airport, detained, turned around, and sent out of the country. So that tells you the hypocrisy is real. It's very, very real hypocrisy there.
Of course. I mean, you can just talk about the abortion issues that they're having. You can talk about Black Lives Matter. You can talk about the huge incarceration rate in the United States. And people forget that a few days ago, somebody walked into a gay bar and started shooting innocent gay people who were just having a party and having a good time. And I think 5 or 6 people had died. And people forget about stories like this. If this happened in Qatar or anywhere else in the world, that would be front page news and say, "Oh my God, look what's happened!" And they just pick and choose wherever they want.
If it had happened in China 20 years ago, they'd still be talking about it today.
Yeah, exactly. So Alex, I mean, how do you think this will affect Europe? Because obviously China has signed this major deal with the Qataris, and Europe has been literally begging Qatar for this gas deal for a couple of years now, since obviously the Ukraine crisis. And how do you think Europe will react? And do you think they will survive at all? Because their options are going down day by day. I mean, what do you think will happen?
Well, we have to remember the pipeline structure in Europe and the Soviet Union, what they did during that time. I mean, there is a colossal amount of pipes coming from Russia into the Ukraine, not just the two big ones that were taken out recently. There is many pipelines, and a lot of them then go down near the Greece and Turkey. Now, something I want to tell you guys is that Europe's going to be fine. The governments are going to be able to get the natural gas in there. They're going to be able to get the oil. They're going to be able to get all the fuel that they need. The only issue is the prices that they're getting them at is the real issue. And that's going to be passed on to the average guy. Sorry to say it, if you live in Germany, if you live in France, if you live in Spain, you're going to be paying more money. I remember that old saying when they said to me when I was young, you know what, son, the mistakes that the government makes, you're going to be paying for them when you get older. And I thought, what are they talking about? And that has come true for the younger generation of Europe. It is dark times, unfortunately, here for the next maybe decade or two, unless some of these elected people put on their geopolitical and their diplomatic hats at the same time, sit down at a table, get this organized, get to an agreement, all guns down, and everybody can then move forward. Until then, skyrocketing prices, places and businesses go to the wall, they go under. Will the lights stay on? Probably. Are they going to be damn expensive? Absolutely. Hotel owners in trouble. Bar, pub owners, anyone in the service industry that has to accommodate electricity, gas to making foods for the kitchens, stuff like that. That is going to go through the roof. And there's where the knock-on effect happens. It's inflation. Then it's high lending rates. Get this. When people need cheaper mortgage rates at the number one time where they need mortgage rates to be as low, it's now. The problem is now the Fed is fighting it the other way. They're clocking higher. Give you guys one example. When you have a guy that has been in around the world, I've seen a lot of things here, and I think Jerry can attest to that. That if you're in a country that has a fixed program, for example, if somebody wants to take out a mortgage in Canada, maybe 30 years ago in the UK, it used to be 10, 15-year mortgage rate, okay? Now that's went to 20, then to 25, now to 30. Now they're talking about the 40-year fixed. That's the next ball to drop. So that means university student finishes university, buys a house, and that is the house that they pay for the next 40 years. And when you're starting to get mortgage rates up against 7, 8, 9%, that house pays for itself 3 times over in interest rates before you're even hitting the principal. So this is a pretty serious time here. Yes, people are not going to go cold, but boy, oh boy, heating is now a luxury.
Jerry, you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think heating is a luxury, and it's really getting to a point now, talking to people in the UK, little less so in Australia. It did shoot up a while ago. Fresh vegetables shot up in Australia, but they've stabilized now, and they're back down to, they're a little more expensive than they were. Nothing ever comes back to what it once was. But it's going to be, for a lot of people, a choice of, do I heat my house or do I have my lunch? And it's as simple as that. When you start now, the problem, and Alex, living in China, would know this. When you have an electricity supply or a gas supply into your home in China, you don't have a standard fee for that. There's no standing charge. In the UK, I believe now it's £10 a day standing charge. So even if you don't heat, you've still got to pay £300 a month or more for your electricity supply, just to have the privilege of not using your electricity supply. Here we use what we pay for. And I think that's probably the big thing. Even if you don't heat yourself, you're still paying the price. And that's a huge problem for any organization or any country that doesn't have its utilities that has privatized its utilities. They need to keep control of their utilities, in my opinion, and that's what China has done. If it belongs to the people, it stays belonging to the people. The government manages it, of course, but it belongs to the people, and they don't put the price up for you, or they don't put the price up to unmanageable levels to make profits. It's not about corporate profits; it's about staying alive. And the mortgage rate's exactly the same. Mortgage rates have to go up because they will bring inflation down eventually. I remember a period of time when in Australia many years ago, my mortgage rate went up to 13, 14%. This is credit card interest rates for buying a house, just to live in a house. So, yeah, it can't be sustained, but it's going to have to happen.
I mean, I live in UK and I can tell you firsthand how bad things are here. I mean, my mortgage rates have gone almost double since last year. My gas bills have tripled since last year. And I go out in the streets, and I made a video about this a few days ago. Things like margarine, butter, pasta, everything's gone up by 40 or 50%. Groceries, and the government says obviously the inflation's gone up 11%, but I just think it's a lie, because if everything has gone up more than 50% or more than 100%, or things have gone triple what they were last year, then it's not 11%. It's much more than that. And obviously the government's not going to release the true figures, because that would cause mass panic, mass riots and things like that.
Yeah, if you take food and fuel away from your calculation, then your inflation rate probably is 10%. If you put food and fuel back into that calculation, it's probably 40, 50%. I don't know the exact figures, but yeah, you take away the major costs that most people have, their home, which is their interest rate or high rents, and their fuel and their food. Those are things that you can't do without. And those are the things that they're taking out of the equation to say your inflation's only gone up by 10%. Well, yeah, it might have, but my living costs have gone up by 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah.
I think also, AJ, the double whammy that I think the Brits are missing here in this whole equation is you haven't seen the Brexit tax yet coming in, and you haven't seen the Brexit
right.
yet. Yeah, that is gonna whop you like you've never seen before. When you cut off a logistical line there, and we're talking, the feeder to the UK, and I'm not saying for everything, but let's just say for everything that maybe you enjoyed, that nice French wine, that great Italian sausage, all those wonderful things, those easy packages moving along. Now you have British parents waking up saying to their sons, hey, remember, we made this to make the country better. And the son or daughter might say, but mom, that doesn't make sense. I could have been able to live and work without ease, without any problems in 27, 28 other European Union countries. Now I can work in one. What happened? Was it worth it? Was it really worth it? Is it worth it to be alone as a country in this chaos? You got Brexit, you got COVID, and now you got one hell of a geopolitical issue. So what do? They throw money at it. I'm waiting, guys. I'm just waiting for just one leader of a European Union country to say, you know what? Enough is enough, to break rank and say, open up Brussels. We got to get this diplomatic channel over. We got to invite the diplomats from Russia. Let's sit down at a table, because we are destroying our credibility and everything what potentially the European Union stood for. And this is it. I mean, it's all for nothing for this one. I mean, they are about to risk putting a lot of countries to the wall here. I know that Bulgaria, a small little country, not too many people might not pay attention to it. They're hurting big time. The Hungarians, they've had enough. The Greeks, they're tired of this. I mean, their shipping is getting involved in this geopolitical race. These other countries, the Baltics, I mean, they were long gone ago. And so what's it going to take for all these countries to go into a massive recession, anarchy in the streets? Yeah, that sounds familiar. It just might happen.
Of course, yeah. And Jerry, you mentioned oil companies in Britain, and I think last 3 months or last quarter, BP and Shell have made a whopping 81 billion in average in terms of profit. And these companies have made 200, 300 billion over the past few years, taking advantage of the high oil prices and gas prices as well. And like I said, these are going into the pockets of shareholders. These are going into the pockets of the executives. None of it's coming back to the ordinary citizen. You see countries like France who have nationalized energy, and the people have not been hit by high energy costs like UK has.
Not
And
so much.
yeah, but however, it's an easy fix. All you have to do is nationalize these energy companies while in the times of hardship, for example, like now. And imagine 80, 90 billion going into your budget as profit, and you can share that amongst everyone. And people, won't have to starve. People won't have to freeze. However, they will never do that because these oil companies, these bankers have a lot of say in how the government policies work, and they have too much power. And it's the same way the military-industrial complex in the United States has too much power. I think they've just gone too big for their boots. The government will never ever target them or get money out of them, and that's a big problem. They rather squeeze the ordinary citizens. And you're right, Alex. I mean, this Brexit tax is coming on top of all these issues people are having in UK. They're increasing the taxes as well, and do you remember the promise that Liz Truss made when Liz Truss was here? She promised that energy prices would be capped; they would not go up. And I said during our live stream, I said, I guarantee you by April it's going to start going up again, and it did. They're going to start, increasing these price caps, and I just don't see how far British people are going to survive. And I was walking around yesterday, and I met up with some friends. We went to the local pub, etc. And everyone's into their football, the World Cup. Everyone's talking about human rights in Qatar. I'm thinking, hang on, hang on a second. Have you seen what's happening in your own country, and you're focused about human rights in Qatar? Have you ever thought, like, if you're able to feed your children, or have you ever thought about keeping your children warm over the next few months, and you're here, you are thinking about Qatar, and I'm just oh my god. I think British people are completely oblivious to what's happening around here. How's it like in Australia, Jerry? And I'm also going to ask Alex about Canada as well. So I'll start with you, Jerry. What do you think about how
It's a little
Australians are
hard.
feeling?
It's a little hard to say because I haven't been there since 2019.
Okay.
We're just over. We left there in November 2019, so 3 years ago was the last time I was there. My understanding, I mean, obviously I've got family and friends over there as well. My understanding is not as bad as Europe. It's certainly not that way. The funny thing is, it's exactly what you say. They're very concerned about global and geopolitical affairs, and they're not really looking outside the window to see what's going on there. There's a very strong fear. No, that's probably not right. There is a fear with some people that is very strong that China is going to invade Australia at some undetermined time in the future. And I've actually had that said to me, but what about China's preparations for war against Australia? What? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And hopefully the mood has changed a little bit, and hopefully the swing is coming round. We've seen that we have Penny Wong as the foreign minister, and we have Anthony Albanese as the relatively new prime minister. And he's been on the hustings. He's been to everywhere. They did COP, they did ASEAN, they did G20, they did the APEC, and now he's going home and he's got to sell this to his public. Now, he has a good public to sell it to. He's still in his first year, so they're fairly relaxed about what can go wrong. He's a billion times better than his predecessor, and I think pretty much everyone except the predecessor's die-hard followers would believe that. He's a better choice for Australia. So I think the optimism in Australia is greater than the optimism or the pessimism in Europe has to be. So I think Australia overall is seeing things in a better way. And as I said, their trade with China has been dented and scratched, but there's no fundamental damage to the vehicle. The vehicle is still perfectly running very, very well with a couple of little scratches on it. The people who sell wine will say that's wrong. The people who sell beef will say that's wrong. But the people who sell iron ore and coal and oil, bauxite, those kinds of minerals and resources that Australia sells lots of to China, will be rubbing their hands. They're very happy at the moment. Australian business with China is still in the black. It's still very positive. 40% of their exports, 40%, 42% actually, of everything that leaves Australia comes into China. They can't afford to upset China. So I think the mood now is going to be one of a little more optimism and positivity. I certainly hope so, because in all honesty, if over the next, and we'll know in a month, what happened after APEC, after G20, after ASEAN meetings, will reflect in the next month in the political scene in Australia. We'll know whether or not this has worked, and I think most people are fairly positive that it will. That will upset the Americans, but so what?
Sure. Before I go into Canada, I've got a question about Australia, really. And everybody knows that the current Prime Minister for Australia is much better than Scott Morrison, Albanese, obviously, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And every time Scott Morrison used to open his mouth, used to be some sort of rhetoric about China or some anti-China rhetoric. And it was just obviously playing up for the camera. The relations got so bad that China stopped all diplomatic channels with Australia during the Scott Morrison years. But however, do you think that the Chinese will ever get that trust back? Because the AUKUS, the submarine deal, is still going ahead. Obviously, Australians have kicked out Huawei, kicked out a lot of Chinese investments. They are obviously causing trouble with the Solomon Islands as well. So these issues are still outstanding. They're still going ahead, and these are major, major issues. And do you think Albanese has got any sort of power to reverse that or to do anything? Because I think those are the main concerns China has. What's your thoughts?
I think Albanese is in a very different position to what Scott Morrison was in. First of all, he has the control of the House. He has the support of his own party. Scott Morrison didn't have the support of his own party. He didn't have control over the House. He was sharing control as a coalition, and that's the fundamental difference in terms of the power structure, but also in terms of public relations, in terms of what really goes on. Albanese does not have the support and has never had the support of the press in Australia. The press is very much controlled, very much a large percent of the press is controlled by one man. He's no longer an Australian, he's an American citizen, and he took over pretty much every local media, every local news stream that you can think of. And he has several TV stations. Most of the city media are his, lots of radio stations as well. And that's Rupert Murdoch. Now, Rupert Murdoch has never been favorable towards Albanese. So people don't believe what they read about him anymore. And I think that's probably the major factor, that people are very, very wise now. And I think the major factors that were really stopping things from happening were that press and the instability. And the instability has gone now. He's going to have to prove in the next 2 years, because the electoral system is only a 2.5-year system. He's going to have to prove over this next 2.5 years that he has done a deal with China and the deal is beneficial, rather than threatening or in any way benefits China more than it benefits Australia. It will be mutually beneficial. So he's got 2.5 years to do it. He's got a press that never supported him anyway, and he's got a parliamentary system that does support him and a parliamentary party that backs him so far. So I think I would feel more optimistic about the way Australia will go in the coming months. We'll see if I'm right. If I'm wrong, of course, it's gone the other way, and it will be a disaster for Australia, because they'll get their iron ore from Brazil, they'll get their bauxite and coal from Indonesia. There's lots of things that China can do that will hurt Australia, but I don't think China wants to. I think China's quite happy with sharing it around. That's my view.
Sure. Going on to Canada now, Alex, and do you think there's any sorts of relations warming between China and Canada? And everybody's seen this viral pic that's going around where President Xi was literally scolding Justin Trudeau in front of the world camera. And do you think there's any hope between China and Canada relations at all?
I think so.
happening?
Vancouver has just elected its first Chinese mayor,
All right.
and
Wow.
that is a pretty good triumph, if you ask me. But to be honest, on the political stage and when it comes to economies, Canada is pretty irrelevant, if you ask me. I mean, they're a country of 37 million people. The issue is that they just haven't invested in their infrastructure. We still have a single rail track going coast to coast, 8,000 kilometers, that has to bring cargo from the east to west and from the west to east, but on one rail line. So you have, they have to sit on the side while another train goes through. They're switching tracks all the time. This shows you a country that is not ready and is not willing to grow up and get into, the big boys club. Canada can do that if they put their money in the right, investments, but they've made mistakes. And we've got countries that are, preaching to countries like China. Let me give you an example, guys. China is a developing country, but all the other countries that are giving advice to China are acting like a developed country and treating China like it is developed. You only have to look at what China has done for the last 3 years here in its COVID prevention. I mean, besides New Zealand, it's one of the only countries that has really used big data, cared for humans. And I think, I'm going to say this, and I don't want my Canadians to take this the wrong way, but when you're born and raised in Canada, yes, of course, you love your mother and father and your brothers and sisters. But then there's this individuality that comes out of you when you get into college. You're an individual. China's different. From what I've experienced here, just being here under a couple of years, is the people here, when there's an issue here. I'm in Chongqing right now. We're in a very serious lockdown, okay? A very serious one. 517,000 local people are volunteering to keep this city going, we'll call it behind the scenes. And it's a spirit. I can't explain it because I haven't had that in my own country. Sure, we might all gather around and help if there's a forest fires or a catastrophe. But look what happened to us in 2020. Our governments failed. Every major, Western or the collective West governments have failed. They failed to keep people alive. The numbers are there. They're not lying. 1 million dead in the United States, 800 million infected. You don't do that to people that you care about. You don't do that to people that you love. You don't do that to your country that, you love and care. And that is something that I think the rest of the world doesn't understand about China. It's a big country, 1.5 billion people, but it's the way this country has moved forward. And it's a hard thing to explain. Really it is, but I've seen it a lot here in the last couple of weeks here on, the way they communicate in the middle of a crisis. We're in a crisis here. There's no denying it. It's a big city. Imagine grinding to the halt a city of 32 million people and then immediately trying to logistically take care of everyone. Well, they've done it. And did we do it in Canada? I mean, Chongqing's almost the population of Canada. They did it here. What happened to my country in COVID? Why didn't they call up the military to help? Why didn't they bring in this extra person out? Why didn't they call every firefighter out there to get out there to help the vaccination drive? Oh, well, we'll try to vaccinate the population over the next 4 months. What are you talking about, guys? Stop everything. Get your military that you pay millions of dollars or billions of dollars a year. Mobilize it. Get everybody ready to go. All hands on deck. Did it happen? Nope. Never happened. And they're still paying the price. They're fooling themselves if they think it's over too. So,
Thanks for that, Alex. Let's move on to the G20 while we were talking about Trudeau. And the G20 seems like a long way away. But when I was watching the BBC at one point, and I was watching it live, and I was working and seeing all of these live headlines come on, and it was like watching a circus of some sort. And you would see stories. Obviously, I'm talking about the Poland incident, and every 2 minutes or so, I would see some news flashes saying, "Oh, the British Prime Minister is now talking to the Polish Prime Minister. British Prime Minister is now talking to NATO. Biden is now talking to NATO. Biden is now talking to Polish Minister. Biden is now talking to Zelensky. Zelensky is now talking to the G7. G7 is now talking to NATO." Every 5 minutes, I used to get these headlines coming up, and it was a circus for at least a whole day. It was like a circus, and media was saying, "Oh, Article 5 is going to get triggered," and they were in the G20, and the insult of these G7 members having their own separate meeting away from the G20, and the amount of time they must have wasted just running around like headless chickens, calling each other up, calling the Polish Prime Minister, calling NATO, calling Zelensky. When they were at the G20, they have any work to do as part of the G20. And then you see this image coming out. Then you see this image coming out all over the press about the G7 members having a meeting, and none of the other G20 members were there. And I just thought it's such an insult to the host, Indonesia, and an insult to the other G20 members. And then you see these obviously these viral images of Rishi Sunak and Justin Trudeau running around, drinking together, going to pubs, wearing matching T-shirts, and I'm thinking, oh, what the hell is going on here? It's like a circus. And then Rishi Sunak gets snubbed by President Xi. Obviously, he didn't like what Rishi Sunak had to say about China. And he was obviously the only prime minister who got snubbed in the G20 by President Xi. And all the other prime ministers or presidents meeting President Xi, all these Westerners, were just using that opportunity to talk about human rights, to talk about. It's just giving them an opportunity to look good in front of the press, and also to look good in front of Biden, obviously. So yeah, I met President Xi and I told him about human rights and blah blah blah, and it just seemed like an absolute circus to me. And my question now is the G20 going to be absolutely irrelevant now? I mean, President Xi has seen firsthand what these G7 members are like, how he got treated. Is he just going to say, you know what, forget this G20 thing and just focus on BRICS and SCO? What's your thoughts about what's happened, Jerry? And I'll go into Alex after that.
I didn't get half of what you said there on my news feed. I mean, it's really entertaining to listen to this. I didn't know about the matching T-shirts. I didn't know about the drinking together. I honestly didn't even know that Rishi Sunak had been snubbed by Xi Jinping. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not getting here. And it's not because it's not available to me. I've got a VPN. I just stay well clear of CNN, BBC, all the crap news because of what you just said. This is not news, it's entertainment. And it becomes so irritating. What the fuck are you doing? You've got a world to run. We're in crisis. We've got 1.5 degrees almost guaranteed in the next few years. We're not going to achieve targets. We're not going to do anything we said we were going to do. The world has got a debt crisis. It's got an interest rate crisis. It's got a gas shortage crisis. It's got all these crises going on, and they're wearing the same T-shirt. Oh, God. So, as far as I'm concerned, Xi Jinping just got on with his business. He got on with business. He met the right people. And you're absolutely right. It's going to be SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement or Cooperative Agreement. It's going to be RCEP, which Australia is in, New Zealand is in, China is in. It's going to be BRICS, and it's going to be Belt and Road, or One Belt, One Road, as the Chinese call it. We've called it in English Belt and Road Initiative. So it's going to be those things now. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if next year if Xi Jinping says, I don't have time for the G20. It was a bit of a waste of time. Why don't I just stay home and you come and visit me when you want to? And those people, there they are. Look, I haven't seen that. Thank you for showing me that.
And the funny thing is, this is them talking to Zelensky. I don't know if you can
yeah, it's muted. It's
Can
okay.
you not hear it? No. Oh, sorry.
No,
That's a shame.
okay.
But I think I'll have to save it to my desktop and share it. But it's on Twitter. If you get a chance to watch it.
Mobile phones out and having a chat with Zelensky.
And then this clip is basically Rishi landing in the G20. The first thing he does, it goes to a pub and starts drinking with Trudeau. And this clip is going around viral. And it is an absolute, it's like a circus. And look at the way Rishi is looking at Trudeau. in this picture. And it was an absolute circus between these. I mean, this clip was gold. It's basically them talking to Zelensky, and he was just so cringy, guys. It was absolute cringe fest. But
Does
yeah,
Zelensky
carry
speak
on.
English? I don't know. I've never seen him. Or
Yeah, he
Yes,
does.
yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah.
He does. Okay. It's because there was no translator there. Okay, no, I had no idea on that, and I do believe you're absolutely right. There's so many. I'm actually in the process of making a series of videos, and I did ASEAN. Sorry, I did APEC and G20. I'm doing a videos called abbreviations and acronyms, and SCO, BRICS, BRI, OBOR. All of these different things are going to be explained over this series of videos over the coming couple of weeks. The big thing for me now, of what I'm seeing here, living in the Greater Bay Area. So Alex and I are both in China, but we're a long, long way apart. But living in the Greater Bay Area here, we've got the RCEP is huge, the Regional Cooperative Economic Partnership. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's basically a free trade agreement between this area. Australia, New Zealand are in it, Thailand, Cambodia. Fresh fruit, vegetables, all these kinds of things are just crossing the borders now, and it's taking 1 hour to get them across the border and into the marketplace 4 hours later. It's really good. So we're seeing things like durian is very popular here. I don't personally like it, but it's hugely popular. And Thai durian is coming across the border. It's the locals tell me it's delicious, and it's really much cheaper than it used to be. And this all because there's a free trade agreement and lots of ease of restrictions. Bringing in fruit used to be more difficult. It's not anymore. So, yeah, things like that, they're going to be much more important than G7s, G20s. I mean, if the G7 really was G7, there'd be a few different countries in it. India would certainly be in it. It's got nothing at all to do with the top economies. The G20 is not the top economies. They're all made up from the top 33 economies, but it's not the top 20.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's not that important a feature. And if they're not going to achieve anything from doing it, we're still waiting. Last year, the G7 came away with a policy of Build Back a Better World, BBB3.
It's Build Back Bankrupt.
Yes.
Nothing has happened. So what was the purpose of that? This year, they're still talking about it. They walked away from COP with an agreement that we're going to have this massive, great big fund, but nobody knows how it's going to be managed, who's going to manage it, where the money is coming from, and how the money is going to be dispersed. So it's going to be the same as BBB3. Nothing will happen. It's just words on a paper, and it's headline making. And I hope, China knows this. Xi Jinping probably knows this, and he's going to walk away and say, I have got better things to do than waste my time there.
Alex,
sure.
What I found most funny out of the G20 is, obviously these missiles hit Poland and killed a couple of farmers, and you see the thing is, there was so many people running around like headless chickens. All the British papers had already printed their paper ready for the next morning. So the next morning, all you see was the headings of, World War III, NATO will start Article 5. However, the night before, Biden already said that these missiles did not come from Russia. They're actually Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. And so all of these papers in the British papers, all printed this story about World War III and how these missiles came from Russia. And Biden already debunked it the day before, and NATO debunked it in the morning. And so we were going around the whole day looking at all of these papers. The British people were looking at all of these papers, thinking that there's going to be World War III, there's going to be NATO's going to kick off Article 5, start war with Russia. And it was absolutely it was just funny to watch. And I was watching people, and I was meeting people on the way to work, and people like running around thinking, oh my God, there's going to be war, I'm thinking, no, calm down. And first of all, why would Russia fire a missile at a couple of farmers, kill these farmers, and start Article 5? Just doesn't make any sense. If Russia wanted to attack Poland, they would hit some NATO bases and things like that. Why would they attack a couple of farmers and say, come on then, let's see what you got? What do you make of this, Alex? It seems like an absolute circus to me.
Well, I want to go back to what we were just chatting about, I just wanted to say something about, the G20, the G7. I mean, these are kind of like, if you're a collector of, we'll call it hotel cards or loyalty cards, okay? You have these in your wallet here if you're a politician of a country. Okay, I got the G7 card and I got the G20 card, but the BRICS card now, the BRICS card, 26% of the world's oil, 40% of the world's corn. I think it's 46% of the world's wheat. What, 3.2 billion people in that? That's the card that you want. And I think Xi has been briefed enough to understand that who he's sitting down with, who he's doing business with. He gave Trudeau a scolding. He deserved it. And, but when it comes to this kind of stuff about, news flow, they printed the papers because they're shameless. They're really shameless. Maybe that was an editor saying, oh man, do we really want to pull the front page? That's going to cost a lot of money for ink. They're shameless. I mean, the true reporters, some of them are actually YouTube content creators that are out there. There's many of them. Some of them we know personally. Patrick Lancaster, who's been doing it since 2014. He's got one of the best archived video footages of that region that could potentially be used in a tribunal in the next future, in the next few years, if this gets into that deep of an investigation. What's going on there? I do want to say, AJ, I got something going on in the building here. Okay. I'm gonna have to. We got some weird, not in my apartment, but I'm pretty certain the smoke alarms are going to be going off here. Either that somebody's burning garbage out front of the building or in the building. But I'm almost certain I'm going to have to leave here in a few minutes.
Sure,
but
no problem. We'll carry on.
I'm going to stick around. But another thing I want to mention is that we have, as Jerry was saying, talking about the COP27. I mean, it's gone from trillions to now billions to now maybe millions of investment. It's gone the opposite way. The momentum's gone. And everyone's looking at China saying, well, where's China's contribution?
Yeah.
My, oh my.
They want China to pay for it now.
Well, internally here, domestically here, there's a lot of money being spent on green. It's a lot. You don't have to go far. I mean, I just take a drive out of the city here and there's windmills floating around, solar panels going around, trees being built all over the place. Everybody's driving e-cars everywhere. The sky is blue, everybody, in Chongqing, China. The sky is blue. That should be the litmus test right there. Go back and look at what this city was 30 years ago. You couldn't see the sky. I mean, one of the ladies in my office who is born and raised in Chongqing told me that she didn't see the blue sky until she left Chongqing. I think it was to go to university or to visit a friend out of town. And not until recently, they put their money where their mouth is. I do want to say, before you guys go on to your next segment, I would really like to join again and have this roundtable chat with you guys again. And I appreciate your efforts, AJ. I know that getting Jerry on the show is a very, very smart move. And Jerry, I have to tell you, I'm really starting to like all the content you're making for YouTube now. When we sat at that table a few months ago, I met Jerry for the first time, and I tell you, he has a lot of knowledge on what's going on in China. This guy has been all over this country. And of course, AJ, we hope to get you here in China as well. But gentlemen, once again, please keep up the work that you guys are doing. And AJ, if you can have me on again, it's kind of interesting being on your show. This is cool. This is cool.
We can do it again next week if Jerry is free.
That would be great.
Like
that would be tremendous.
You're happy with that,
but
Jerry?
I just want to say special thanks to some of my viewers here. I'll leave the feed on the iChongqing channel. If you guys don't know about us, we're media reporting out of Chongqing, China here, one of the biggest cities in the world. And my name is Alex. And of course, you guys know me from Reporterfy. But thanks once again. Thanks to Hang, thanks to Suntan and Ben and all you guys. It's been a great pleasure to share the screen with you. AJ, be careful, because you will be able to chat with Jerry for hours, okay?
Yeah, I know.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yeah,
Jerry,
I've got
if we
so
could sit and
many.
have beers together